Good morning. Welcome to this Governance and Audit Committee. I'm Councillor Tim Harrison, Chairman of the committee. I am without my Vice Chairman, Councillor Helen Crawford today. To my right is Amy Pride, Democratic Officer. Welcome and warm wishes to all committee members, cabinet members and officers. Could I ask that you please ensure your mobile phones are switched off or to silent mode. Not been notified of any fire alarm, but you know the drills. If the fire alarm sounds, please exit and group on the St Peter's Hill outside the front. Could I ask if you wish to ask a question or make a comment, indicate by raising your hand and try and let Amy aware, being as I haven't got my deputy here today. This meeting will be recorded and can also be watched as a live stream or later via the SKDC webcast. Do we have any apologies for absence, Amy?
Thank you, Chairman. We received apologies from Councillors Helen Crawford and Bridget Lay. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Are there any members who have an interest to declare? Don't forget, if this becomes apparent during the meeting, you can declare it then also. Can we move on to item 3, the minutes of the meeting held? Are there any comments from committee members on the accuracy of the minutes? Councillor Woolley.
Thank you, Chairman. And it's on the back of the minutes of the meeting previous to that. You will recall, and I can't see reference to it, and apologies if there is reference and I've missed it, but you will recall that I asked you, you personally as Chairman, about the training that you were required to do because of the Code of Conduct complaints that had been found. And you agreed at the time of that meeting that you felt it was inappropriate to step away from the chair until you'd completed the training, and I applaud you for that. Can you just reassure myself and the committee that you have now completed that, Chairman, so it's in order for you to continue to be a chair here? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. If you'd actually been present at the last meeting, you would have also realised that a statement was made at the start of that meeting which clarified that was drawn to the end. There was a period that you should have been made aware of 6 months to undertake that training. If you haven't been made aware of that, I could go to Mr Watts and ask him to verify that for you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, part of the sanction was to complete that training within 6 months of the decision of the hearing review panel. Thank you.
Chairman, if I may come back, I completely accept that, and that's not a problem at all. It was more the point that until the training is completed, it's the positions and, in fact, the to anyone else being a chairman of a committee until that training is completed. So
again, sorry, Councillor Woolley, I'm going to interrupt you. You weren't present at the last meeting. There was a statement made at the end of the last meeting that I had drawn a line under this. There are 6 months to complete that training. I will take the 6 months to complete that training, and until such time as that is up, this question is moot. Thank you. Councillor. So, any other questions on the minutes of the last meeting? No? Can I get somebody to propose those, please? Councillor Whittington, thank you, and Councillor Stevens, second, and thank you. Can we take a vote on those minutes, please? All those in favour? Abstentions? And against? Thank you. Move on to item 4. I'm going to go to Councillor Knowles for the internal audit follow-up report. That should be on page 11 of your pack. Councillor Knowles.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The purpose of the internal audit follow-up report is for the committee to review and note the contents of the follow-up of internal audit reports prepared by BDO on our behalf. They are our appointed internal auditors, who I'm sure will answer any questions you may have if they arise. Clearly it's very important for the committee to regularly review performance against audit recommendations that have been submitted. There are BDO followed up 2 recommendations from 2023 and 24. One was completed and the other one is still in progress. That one is about 10% of the jobs to be formally quality assured. For 24-25, there were 13 follow-ups so far. 10 have been completed, 3 are in progress, and there are a further 5 which are not yet due. Those still in progress will be brought back to the future committee as appropriate, and I ask for your agreement to note and agree the follow-up report. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Whittington.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Knowles, for the report. Just one question. Obviously, there are still a few items to be completed. When would be the intention to bring the update on those before this committee? Thank you.
Thank you. If I can come to Gurpreet, please.
Yeah. So I presume, Councillor, you're referring to those in progress. Yeah. Yeah, so in the due date column that you'll see, it has the strikeouts for the previous due dates, and then it has when it is now next considered due. So the audit committee that follows that date is the date to which we will bring to bring that update.
So just to clarify, so it'll be the next G&A committee meeting after the due date. Thank you very much indeed.
Councillor Woolley.
Thank you. On a number of these items, it says that we confirm this has now been completed, or we confirm this has now been completed and is operational. So I'm just wondering, obviously there's quite a big difference between completed and operational. As an example, on page 21, you've got the council should develop a dedicated testing schedule, blah, 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 blah. But because it's been completed, doesn't necessarily mean it's operational. And so is that the case, that it is, yes, that work has been done to put something in place, but it's not actually live at the moment, as with a number of these other things, or is that incorrect?
Thank you. So a mixture is what I would say. So when we do the follow-up, we're obviously looking to see that the authority have put in place what it is that we've recommended, and in this one it was around a testing schedule that we put in place for business continuity. There is a challenge with all internal auditors as to at what point do you say, look, that's sufficient enough in terms of what's been done so far, and how much do we continue to monitor the completion of something. We always keep a watching brief on these as this. Is there any other intelligence which is informing us that we're not happy with the progress or the effectiveness? If that was the case, it would be incumbent on us to bring that back to this committee and say we're going to look further into this, either in an internal audit plan or to follow up again. But I guess the slightly more blunt answer is to fully test effectiveness for months, if not years, beyond something implemented is quite difficult and is very challenging for any internal audit firm to do. But I do take on board what you've said and noted. Happy to speak to management about whether we hold a slightly higher bar or line on we need to now go further and test effectiveness, but we would need to have that conversation with management about doing that.
Councillor Woolley.
Thank you, Chairman, and I completely accept, again, what you've just said. But I do wonder whether, yes, from the point of view of not just clarity, because if something's completed, to me, it's done, finished, move on. It's all in place. So if there are items that are ongoing or require more operational input, then I think we need something that just hints at that or says it in this plan or report would be my preference. Thank you.
Mr. Swinton.
Thank you, Chairman. It was just to come in on the point about, with it being specific to the BCP. So during that audit, we did create a training programme which was shared, and that ranges over 2 years. So one of the actions was to create the programme, so it is in place. But obviously, as Gurpreet said, it is a rolling action. What I would just add to that is that the waste team were actually due to be desktop exercised in March, so in March now, as part of that training exercise. because they were tested in a very real and live sense in January, we've put that to the steering group for business continuity, and we've agreed that we don't need to desktop them because they had a very live test which was debriefed. So it is in place, it is being acted upon, but obviously if we have a live event, we can then use that as a real training exercise. So it's there, but it's ongoing.
Do I have any more questions? Mr. Burt.
I'm interested from the management response side, page 24, in particular the area around the business continuity and disaster recovery, where it states that the floods that we all know that took place actually impacted that, and I'm interested to understand how it impacts it from the point of view of business continuity planning, because that would suggest that we don't have in place something to make sure that we can keep things going within the council. So there's that side of it. And also the one just below that that talks about a meeting. It'd be quite nice to have the date of the meeting that is being set in there, so that we basically don't bother the management team. Thank you.
Yeah, we did bring that up in the pre-meet, so I think that's going to be dealt with. Richard was aware of that, wasn't he, Richard? If I can go to our friend at the back.
Thank you, Chairman. If I take the last one first. So the two, I believe you're talking about the BCP awareness sessions where we've had management and service areas in to understand how a BCP is completed and what best practice looks like. So they were run on the 18th of February and the 18th of March. So the second one was run yesterday. We've given a time frame back to all those that were in the 18th of February session to have their draft returned to us, reviewed, and then a final version back to us by the 18th of April. All those that attended yesterday have until the 18th of April to provide us with their first draft for review. So that's probably the easier one. In terms of the first one in BCP and what's in place and what isn't maybe in place, the reason for the delay is that it wasn't just me during the flooding event. There was a whole team across the senior team, so a number of officers are brought in, and that live event becomes the priority. So there was a delay in completing the BCPs. We wanted to allow more time so that they can be the best version they can. What is always in place in the background is a BIA, so a business impact analysis, which is effectively a risk assessment for business continuity. They are always in existence, they have always been there, and the reason we were able to stand down the exercise plan for the waste team is because we're using that as a real test. We were able to see that the plans they already have in place worked perfectly to support that service in still providing a very in-demand service during a very difficult time. So the BCP, just again to be clear, at the time of this audit, we were already undertaking an internal review. There has always been an overarching strategy for the council, and they've always had the business impact analysis. The business continuity plan, the BCP, is something that we introduce as an additional layer. So if you go back to the risk assessment example, risk assessment and a safe system of work is the same principle. So the BCP is an extension where you've got a service area that has higher demand or is a more complex service area. It allows you to elaborate on the plan. So the BCPs were an aspirational, but there has always been a BIA in place and it's always been tested. So it's not a case that there was never anything in place. There's something there. What this review has done is we're adding an additional layer of that resilience. And the reason it's not just me and that every service area attends and every service area does them themselves that I review is so that they have that resilience in-house. There's no point in me doing it. We need to build that resilience and knowledge throughout the entire management team. So that's the reason we have the process we have.
What I'm going to do now is, because we jumped straight in and went into the questions on this, probably if Gurpreet presents this, it might pre-answer a lot of these questions that are coming out now. So if I can go to you to present the report, is that okay?
To present the follow-up report, sorry. I'm not sure there's much further that I would add than the councillors presented already in terms of a summary. The only thing I was going to add in terms of the comment that was made earlier, just as I was reflecting on it, is that ultimately when we also do our follow-up, it is a judgment, and that when we're looking at what's been completed, we will take a judgment as to whether does that give us enough assurance that we feel we can close this off And there will be some circumstances where the authority will say, we've actually done something, but we don't want to say that it's complete yet because we do want to see the effectiveness bed in. And that's our judgment that we apply. So just to add to that, that is the main mechanism that we would use, is applying our judgment. But I don't think there's anything further for me to add other than saying that we are happy and pleased with the progress the authority have made in terms of completion, and it is higher than my portfolio of other local government clients in terms of completion rates. We are seeing a more positive position here than on average.
Thank you for that. Does that answer yours, Councillor Woolley, satisfactorily? Yeah? Are you happy with that? Do I have any more points to Councillor Stokes?
Sorry, without diving into too much detail, but just on 23, the responsive repairs, I think it's a bit slightly concerning that one person, it depends upon one person that we're doing quality checks or recording them. We need a bit of, I would have thought, succession planning or something to look at there. If one person goes off, it doesn't happen. That's what it's saying.
Can anybody come back on that for me?
I think the reference to the post is in the audit comment. I think the management response says that post-check process has commenced and are progressing with KPIs and monitored monthly. Suffers some delays, but it doesn't. I don't think it explicitly talks about a lack of staff being the cause. It's not my particular area, so I'm not really coming from a position of knowledge, but the management comment to me doesn't suggest it's a resource issue.
Right, so that could be again just a wording of that response. Okay, we can probably have a look at tidying them up a bit to make that a bit more understandable.
Just on that point, because I think it is important, I think we've also reflected that in some instances the management responses aren't particularly helpful to the committee, because it gives a very generalisation of perhaps why if there is a delay, the reasons for it. So we will feed that back to management to be a lot crisper and clearer on the root issue and cause, so that the members here feel better informed. Thank you.
Thank you. And that includes those date things that Mr. Bowling mentioned. Thank you. And no more questions on this? Councillor Whittington.
Mr. Chairman, just one general statement. I agree with the comment the auditors has made, that this is in comparison to quite a lot of local authorities, and I have had experience of local authority accounting. This is actually, there's nothing on here that's flashing red. There's a few things that potentially are flashing slightly amberish, but nothing that's. It's a very good. It is a very positive report overall. Thank you. And I have seen a lot worse. A lot worse.
Okay, on that that is for noting, and we'll move on to item 5, the draft internal audit plan. That's on page 27, and I'll go to Councillor Knowles.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Item 5, as it says, draft internal audit plan, and you are asked to approve the internal audit plan for 2025-26. Clearly, it's in order to demonstrate good governance, SKDC must maintain an adequate and effective internal audit services. These are provided for us by BDO. They produced an indicative plan which was presented in January, 22nd of January, and the final plan is before you now on pages 31 to 57, and we would seek your approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Gurpreet, do you want to speak on this? Thank you.
Thank you. Just to add to Councillor Knowles' summary at the beginning, you have obviously seen this plan before. I just want to identify a couple of key things. So what you will notice in the 25-6 plan, particularly so for the upcoming year, there are some key areas that I think are important that we'll be looking at that should give this committee assurance in areas such as treasury management, main financial systems, and obviously there's quite a lot of change in that area with the authority as well, and payroll. There's quite a strong focus on financial areas, and obviously given the change in the system that would not have been there in the previous year. So I think it is worth noting that that is going to be key bits of assurance that we'll be presenting to the committee over 25-6. Obviously, the plan is largely similar to what you would have seen previously. The only other thing I wanted to mention, this is a bit technical, and just to make you aware, as internal auditors, we have to comply with standards in terms of how we operate, how we evidence things, how we remain independent, and how we remain objective in our work. The previous standard that we had to comply to was the public sector internal audit standards developed by SIPFA. That changes from the 1st of April for all internal auditors, so not just BDO, across the sector, and it notes that in the internal audit charter, it's the new global internal audit standards in UK public sector, effective from the 1st of April 2025. It won't change anything for this committee, but just so you're aware, because it is a change across the internal audit sector, those standards that we operate against are going to change, but fundamentally they're largely the same as what we previously operated against. Apart from that, I don't have anything further to add.
Thank you. Do I have any questions? Go to Councillor Whittington first and then Councillor Stephen.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. 3 questions. In terms of the plan, obviously you've got the plan, you've got the rewarded days, which you presumably will then go and allocate to each aspect of the plan. How much flexibility is there in the plan if there becomes a pressing emerging issue that needs to be dealt with or looked at? Second question, obviously I'm very much aware of the fact that the external auditors to an extent will rely upon some of the work that you are doing, and I'm especially thinking around the implementation of the new financial systems this year, because obviously you can do a lot of the compliance checking and stuff that they can. So what would be the level of the corporational linking between you and the external auditors, especially around this, because obviously it is a major change. Because it's a major change, it's a major risk area. So just trying to tease out that amount of work you would do with external auditors working together on that. Obviously, I'm aware of the change in the standards, but I also remember when the standards were changed for external auditors, and at the time it was said, oh, there's probably not going to be a great deal of change. The reality for external auditors was there was quite a bit of change that came in. You know, more and more requirements of what external auditors had to do in terms to sign off for local authorities' accounts, and that's been one of the reasons why. I mean, historically, only a few years ago, the vast majority of local authorities were having their annual accounts signed off within a matter of 6 months at the end of the financial period. Now, because of an awful lot of the extra changes, some of which were imposed by government, some of which were imposed by new standards, have caused a lot of delays to that. So, just a little bit, I did a little bit of reassurance around that, because I'm a retired accountant. I've sat in local authorities. I've seen changes in accounting standards being brought in to change the policies. And I've seen people and managers and auditors say, oh, there's going to be no real change, they're largely the same. But the reality is, when they're actually implemented, there is extra work. And I feel that it's incumbent upon me, with my professional background, to raise these matters at this committee, because it would be remiss of me not to do so.
On the first point, Councillor, on page 45 of the packs, we have allocated 27 days within the 220 days of the plan to contingency. So in terms of your question on flexibility, that's around, I think, 12% of the total days allows us to be flexible to adapt. The second part to that as well is that a plan is always a plan. The plans are there to be adapted, changed, so we ask this committee's approval of this plan. If there are changes, we would bring it back to this committee and outline the reasons why we are looking to move something, etc. So we would go through those formal processes. But life changes, things happen, and if that is the case, we would come back to this committee and amend the plan, but hopefully it largely stays the same. But there's a good amount of contingency there to allow us to be flexible. On the second point around external auditors, again, there's probably a couple of parts of this. One is we do engage with them, so we'll have annual meetings with them. We'll have discussions with them throughout the year. And obviously, if there is anything of significance, it is incumbent on either party to report that to the other, and we'll have that private as well as open relationship with them to share any information that we think is relevant about the organisation that may help. if there are reviews that we think that they may find of particular interest, like the main financial one, treasury, payroll, etc., we will share those reports with them. They're presented here, so there's no reason for us not to do that. As part of the scoping process, we may then also engage with them to find out are there areas they feel we should be focusing on, and to make sure that we have their input. However, I do need to be clear as well. I started my career at the Audit Commission, so I know external audit and how it operates, etc. I don't do external audit anymore. But since the abolition of the Audit Commission, firms don't rely on each other. So it wouldn't be, and that's just across the entire sector, that's not unique to BDO. So no firm says, well, external auditors have done this testing, and so therefore internal audit don't have to, or internal audit have done this testing, and therefore external audit don't have to. All the firms need their own evidence and assurance to reach their conclusion. So it's one of collaboration, cooperation and discussion, rather than formal relying on each other's work, and that doesn't happen across the sector anymore. Since firms have been involved, so we will continue to engage with them.
Councillor Stevens.
Thank you, Chairman. One reasonably acute question, one rather thick question. You talk about the 25-26 focus on financial systems. Is that to say you don't examine financial systems normally, which would be pretty odd, I think? And my stupid question is that you talk of an internal audit, and surely by the nature of it, you don't work for SKDC, or do you? And then surely this is an external audit, and if they are external auditors, who are they? Thank you.
So in terms of financial systems, there is nothing within the standards that mandates internal audit has to look at financial systems, but pretty much across the sector. Most internal auditors would look at financial systems within any organisations, just given the fundamental importance of that in terms of driving lots of different activity, governance arrangements across an organisation. In this authority, and we are just coming towards the end of our first year, there is a change to the financial system. So to look at it in our first year felt slightly redundant, and it made sense for it to be within the second year, the one we're about to go into from the 1st of April onwards, to focus on main financial systems. So that's why you're probably seeing a slightly increased amount, but typically in future years you will continue to see a focus on financial systems. The sector, depending on who you ask, is under strain, and financial challenges are here and set to continue, and so therefore financial system areas is something that we would continue to focus on. On the second question, I think that's just language and terminology. We do not work for in any way SKDC, BDO, an external organisation. It's just the language that's used within the sector is internal audit are those who focus on the internal controls of an organisation. External audit are those who assess the accounts to provide a true and fair opinion as to whether your accounts are correct and valid. Internal does not in any way suggest that we work for the authority or are employed by them. Some people use the language of we are internal external auditors, but that may confuse people who may not be used to the terminology.
Thank you for that answer. Councillor Stevens again.
Thank you. Just to clarify the last point again. So, the external audit, who are they?
Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Chair. Can I confirm that Councillor Stevens has been on the training for this committee? The training, I would have thought, made clear the difference between internal audit and external audit. The external audit, I'm not sure if he's sitting behind you, but we do have external auditors which are mentioned at virtually every committee that we go to. So internal audit have been reporting to this committee forever, and so have external audit. I'm quite surprised that you don't know the difference.
Councillor Stevens.
I'm very grateful to the leader of the council for his sharp reply. Of course I did the training, of course I'm aware of the difference. What I asked was, who are the external auditors? That's my question. What's the name of the company?
So since April 24, of which KPMG have been to this meeting several times, it's KPMG.
I am slightly disturbed, Councillor Stevens, that you weren't aware of that, but nonetheless. Maybe, do we have any other questions?
It's certainly my prerogative to ask for that to be confirmed. Thank you.
Mr Bowling.
Sorry, apologies. I just wondered if we could perhaps amend the plan to show when the last time something was audited. Because to me that gives a really good indication about whether it's urgent or not urgent, or whether it's something we only do once every 4 years or something like that. So I can see exactly where it fits in versus the risk register, which clearly says certain things are more risky than others. Thank you.
Happy to include that in our progress report potentially, but I can speak to management about how we present that. Obviously after this we will in future committees have a progress report for 25/6 which has the names of reviews and where we are up to on them. I personally don't mind adding into that, say, the dates of when it was last reviewed, or in the report when the reports come to you. It's a relatively straightforward thing for us to do, but I'm happy to take instruction from management on how best to present that.
Mr Bowling.
Just to explain why I've said that, the highest risk shown on the risk register is cyber security, and we're not doing it immediately. So my question would have been why. I've subsequently found out that actually it was done last year, so not such a big deal. But it's not very easy to see that from this, and that's why I'm asking that question. Okay.
Okay, so we've clarified that, and that moving forward there will be some sort of notification put in there on that. Councillor Worley.
Thank you, Chairman. The page 38, item reference 13 is governance failure. Can you just expand a little bit on what that's going to include? I accept it would be the council as a whole, but I just wonder how much you dig into, for example, if there's governance failure in, or perceived governance failure in certain parts, or whether it's just a very, very broad overview. The reason I'm asking is that one of the chairmen of the committees made comment that they did not feel that they had sufficient resource at the time to do what they were doing, and so for me that would be something that this committee would want to be aware of and make sure was in hand for the future. If that's about the only example I can think of off the top of my head, but what does governance include?
I'll give a brief answer. On page 111 of your packs is this authority's own definition of that risk. So where it says governance failure, that's the authority's risk. It's risk 13 within your risk register. And we're saying this review links into that risk that this authority have identified. On page 111, the authority set out the potential causes, plus also the controls and enablers that the authority has in place. So that, for me, is the definition of what the authority see in terms of governance failure.
Councillor Worley.
Get that, but I'm sort of, digging that little bit deeper of, yeah, you've got that definition, but what happens if there's more to it than that? Do you then dig further in, or do you just go, no, we've completed the definition as far as the definition is concerned, and that's the end of it?
I'm not sure I fully understand the point, but I'll try my best and tell me if you feel it may be a question for management. We have the risks that the authority have identified from the risk register in our plan. We then set out audits in the subsequent years that we say that may fit against that risk to show that our reviews are linked to your own assessment of risk. We have in there a review around performance management, which is a key part of governance, to look at how do you structure your KPIs, monitoring of departments, report that into senior management and escalate matters to make sure that they are being dealt with appropriately. So in our performance management review, ultimately a definition of failure of governance would be that your structures to manage performance and to escalate matters are not being done appropriately, that senior management and members are aware, and then therefore they can take action appropriately against those areas. That's one element of governance. Obviously governance as a whole includes lots of other things like your constitution, gifts and hospitality, structures, terms of references, etc. We are internal auditors are not necessarily going to review every element of all of those, because management will attain their own assurances of those areas as they set out on page 111 in terms of the controls that you have in place around schemes of delegation and training and other things. And so performance management in our plan is going to look at one element of that risk, and we will be reporting that back to this committee. But this committee needs to be assured from all the sources of assurance, of which we are one, management assurance is another.
Are there any more questions? Okay, we are being asked to approve the internal audit plan, Appendix A. Can I get a proposer for this, please? Councillor Whittington, can I get a seconder, please? Councillor Stokes, and can we take a vote on that, please? It's unanimous, thank you. We're going to have a slight change in the line-up now. We're going to go to the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act policy. That's on page 117 of your pack. It's to facilitate some needs of staff. And I'll go to Councillor Knowles first.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is item 9 on your agenda, and it involves the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act and the policy. The policy document is for noting and affirm that no amendment to the Council's regulations of investigation, powers and policies are required. The Cabinet approved the policies on the 6th of February 24, recommending that this committee reviewed the policy annually. This report facilitates that review. It was prepared by Graham Watts, and the RIPA follows the procedures. It's very strict precautions and procedures taking place before they are implemented. There's training given to every potential user. It is used very, very rarely in the experience of SKDC, and the review so far has not shown any cause to change the policy that was produced. The policy is produced for you on pages 121 to 127, and I seek your support. Thank you.
I'll throw this open to the committee. Are there any questions? I have one, if you don't mind. Looking into the procedure of how this goes, am I right in assuming that if the police, the difference between the covert and overt surveillance is the police must request that we actively surveil somebody on, and must have a RIPA in place to do that? Is that correct?
Thank you, Chairman. It depends on the circumstances. How the police operate is completely separate to ourselves, and we work in partnership with the police, obviously, and the CCTV now being located in the police station is going to obviously help that partnership improve the way that it responds to crime and disorder in the town and towns that it serves in the district. Page 122 sets out the specifics of the Act, where it talks about the activity that would be covered by RIPA. So they are directed surveillance, intrusive surveillance, or use of a covert human intelligence source. They're the areas that we would require a RIPA for if we were going to undertake surveillance in any of those areas of activity. So that would also cover the police in terms of the activity that they undertake. So they are the areas that would be covered, and we would need a RIPA for. A RIPA is an extremely complicated and complex thing to go through. It requires court approval, so you can't just collect intelligence covertly on at your whim without going through that proper process. However, there are instances where you can obtain information. Certainly, the use of CCTV, the fact that we've got signs up saying that it's in operation, all of the cameras are located on our website. That is not a covert source of intelligence gathering. Those cameras are operational in a public space, and the public are made aware of them being operational. Hopefully that answers the question, Chairman, but I'm happy to go into further detail if necessary.
Yeah, I'd like to come back on that. So, yeah, they are overt surveillance when they are haphazardly pointed wherever and whatever. But as soon as the police instruct CCTV to monitor an individual, surely that engages Ripper, unless that individual was reported by our... So if our CCTV said, we've seen Mr A break a shop window or whatever, then that's our... It's happenstance, they've happened to catch it and they've seen it, and I get that. But if the police come to CCTV and say, I want you to look out for Mr B, and if you see him, follow him and see what he's doing, that then turns overt surveillance into covert surveillance in my understanding of it, and should therefore need a Ripper.
So I just want to refer you to the revised code of practice for the covert surveillance and property interference document that the Home Office produce. So directed surveillance is classified as the following. Surveillance is directed if the following are all true. So all of these four have to apply. It is covert but not intrusive surveillance. So it has to be covert. So the person that is being monitored it can't be overt, it has to be covert. It is conducted for the purposes of a specific investigation or operation. So there has to be a specific investigation or operation that the police are undertaking at that particular moment in time, and effectively the CCTV team are being utilised as part of that identified operation or investigation. It's likely to result in the obtaining of private information about a person, whether or not one specifically identified for the purposes of the investigation or operation. So you're looking to obtain personal private information about an individual. And the final one is it is conducted otherwise than by way of an immediate response to events or circumstances, the nature of which is such that it would not be reasonably practical for an authorisation under Part 2 of the 2000 Act to be sought. So that is basically in response to something that is happening, and that's where CCTV are really, really effective in working with the police, because we can respond to events as they happen. So we can provide that intelligence on the ground at the time in partnership with the police.
Right. Now, maybe you can clarify for me, if our surveillance team, our CCTV team are watching, if the police, as far as I've read up on this, and if the police come to our surveillance team and say, we want you to watch Mr A, if you see him, follow him, watch him around, and we do that and make it covert without the Ripper in place, the onus is not on the police for requesting it, the onus is on our CCTV guy if they provide that information without the Ripper. Is that correct?
Yeah, if we are using our CCTV in a way that is required under Ripper, then it is we would need to get that Ripper in place. Sometimes the police apply for the Ripper, and that would cover use of CCTV, but if a Ripper is not in place and we are using our resources in a way that a Ripper would be required, and one isn't in place already by the police or any other organisation, then yeah, that would be partly down to ourselves. But again, that criteria would need to be met in terms of directed surveillance. We'd need to be satisfied that what we were doing required a Ripper. And a lot of the time in the CCTV control room, it's responsive, acting on intelligence and providing information in relation to a live situation that's occurring where an alleged offence has occurred, and we're obviously assisting with inquiries as they happen.
Yeah, I understand that, that's great, but what I'm trying to get at is I just want to clarify for the committee here is that if we provided information that was considered a Ripper, needed a Ripper, but didn't have one, it will be the actual guy or woman who is operating the controls of the CCTV who is responsible. The onus is on them, as far as I've read it in the legislation. Is that correct?
I'd have to double check. I mean, ultimately, it would be the council that's failed to comply with a RIPA requirement. I'd have to check in terms of who individually was personally liable. I would assume it would be the council. What we'd effectively be doing there is collecting evidence where we don't have the correct authority to do so, which could be challengeable in court. If we went that far with proceedings and sort of prosecution, that potential evidence could be challenged. The other element is that we're collecting information we're not legally obliged to collect, and that could result in a complaint to the Information Commissioner's Office, because obviously we're dealing with personal information that we're not entitled to collect. So they're the risks, I suppose, in terms of operators not acting in accordance with RIPA. What I will say in support of that, though, is that we have annual training, which is actually in the process of being rolled out very shortly to those staff that are in operational roles. So I'm quite confident with that training that all of our staff should know their obligations in relation to RIPA.
Thanks for that, because that is the point that worries me, and the point that I was trying to make is that, as far as I can see, and you're not, can't point me otherwise at the moment, that it is, regardless of the organisation they're working for, it is the controller of that camera at that time that passes that information over that is at fault if they do that. And I just want to protect our staff on that. That's all I'm thinking of. Councillor Whittington.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for asking those questions, because I think it's raised a very important issue. Where are we in a situation where the police would have come to us and go, we think Mr. A has been involved in some stuff? Is there such an, and we want a RIPA put in place? What about stuff we've already recorded historically that is part of a pattern of behaviour, potentially? Is there such a thing as a retrospective RIPA, if you understand where I'm going? Or would we say, well, we can only do it from this point, the police have requested it, but we can't provide you anything subsequent that we may still have on tape somewhere? Thank you.
Mr. Watt?
No, it can't be retrospective. It has to be, in the application that you make to the court, you have to be very, very clear about what evidence you're anticipating gathering, the time scale, and there's also review periods within it as well. So we've actually only, just before I came here, actually, over 4 years ago now, we've used a RIPA once. That was for a fly tipping case, and the reason for the RIPA was that we wanted to access and monitor a social media profile, because an individual was basically advertising the collection of waste from individuals and then going and frequently fly tipping it. And because it was an individual rather than a company, we were able to use a RIPA, and we were successful in prosecuting in that case. But it was a very, very complex and long-winded process to get that RIPA in place. But it can be really effective. When you're using CCTV, it's in the public domain already. It's not covert surveillance, because you're already operating in a particular area. If something happens in that area and it's recorded, it's happened in a public space where you've put notice of that you're already recording. So that's where that evidence can be requested by the police, and it can be provided without the requirement of a RIPA.
The difference, Councillor Whittington, is when it's directed, when you're direct to a specific.
It so happens that our CCTV cameras pick something up. At a future point, the police can come back and go, please, can we have a look? And you wouldn't, yeah, that's fine. Thanks for clarifying that. But thanks, Mr. Chairman, for raising those questions, because it's raised questions in my mind as well. Thank you.
Just one quick thing while we're on this, if I can. We have moved now, our CCTV has moved into the new police station. I did raise the question about the protocols of the police. All the protocols that were there before are still there, even though they're in the same building, as far as I understand it. Mr. Watts?
I'm just going to give an example of, so if there was an area of the town that was not covered by CCTV and there was prominent fly tipping in it, for example, or another, any other kind of criminal activity, and we put cameras up, didn't provide notice, didn't tell anyone we were recording, and we obtained that evidence, that's where a RIPA would be required, because you're purposely trying to catch someone doing something in an area that is not covered by our public CCTV. that's where a RIPA would be required if you want to use that evidence that you're gathering. So that's just the difference, really. I just wanted to kind of make that clear.
Can I just slight sidetrack here? It's, something that's worried me. There's been a number of new cameras put up around town that I am told aren't our CCTV cameras, but are in the streets. And what's the legalities on that?
Do you, public-owned cameras, or...?
I think a business has put them up outside in the street on things, pointing up and down the streets, and it's in my ward. So what's the answer? Do they have to apply for a permit for that, or can anybody just do that?
I don't think RIPA would apply to a local to a private business, and I don't think. Yeah, I don't think that. I mean, they don't have the same requirements that we have as a public authority, unfortunately.
We'll go to item number 7, the appointment of Leisure SK. Yeah, but I'm moving the items, as I said to you at the start, I'm moving the order of the items. So item number 7 is now the appointment of Leisure SK directors, page 129 on your agendas. Councillor Knowles.
Thank you, Chair. As you'll see, this is in my name as Cabinet responsible for governance, but as I am involved with Leisure SK as a director, I will declare an interest and I will withdraw from the meeting and ask Graham to take over this item, although he's just moved. But Graham Watts will take this item. Thank you.
Advice on this, Mr. Watts, if I can. We don't need to go private at this point, do we? Can you turn Phil's mic off, Ash, please?
Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Chairman. No need to go into private session unless the committee starts talking about individuals, in which case I think it would be prudent to go into private session. Thank you.
Do you want to deliver on this, Graham?
Thank you, Chairman. So the report before you seeks to appoint Mr David Scott onto the Board of Leisure SK in place of Mr Paul Sutton, who was appointed on an interim contract, which is due to expire shortly. So that's the first recommendation in the report. It's also prudent to note that, that Deborah Roberts has resigned as a member of the board and the chairman of the board with effect from the 31st of March. So it's just to report that to you formally. At this point in time, the council has not made a nomination for her replacement. What it might be helpful to do is for this committee to delegate that appointment to the head of paid service in consultation with yourself as chairman of the committee, because otherwise there may be a slight delay before we meet again as this committee where you can make that appointment. So that would be what I recommend, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Do I have any questions on this? Councillor Whittington.
Thanks, Chairman. I've got no problems with the appointment of Mr Scott because we're replacing the acting Deputy Director of Finance with the permanent Deputy Director of Finance. So I can see no issue with that at all. So I'd be happy to support that.
So, sorry, Mr Bowling.
I just wonder, obviously, Mr Scott, very good, capable individual, but we should ensure that he gets his director training as he's becoming a company director. Okay.
I think Mr Wiles confirmed that in the pre-meet. If you just want to do that for the committee as well, please, Mr Wiles.
Yes, so Mr Scott, when he was initially approached, had a conversation with the monitoring officer to understand what that role would entail. He's also spoken to existing board members to understand the roles and responsibilities of being a board member, but he'll also be externally supported through training as well to ensure that he's fully aware and comfortable with the role. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Councillor Stoke.
Yeah, I've no problem with David Scott. I think he'll be fine in that particular role. I think there's always a challenge. I mean, Leisure SK is a multi-million-pound company. It's gone through several processes and directors from inception under the previous administration and now our administration. I do just worry a little bit about our options for finding the right people to go on the board, and I do feel there is a little bit of a tricky one in placing officers on the board, and that just slightly concerns me in terms of the level, because of the restrictions of people who can't go on. I think it presents another restriction of who can go on, and their level of experience in terms of leisure, and then in terms of running or being part of running a multi-million-pound company. That slightly bothers me, if I'm honest, and I just, whilst I've no problem with yourself and the head of paid services coming up with names, I'm just not sure how you come up with the names. That's the bit that worries me.
Thanks for that. We'll take that on note when we discuss that in a moment. Councillor Shorrock.
Yeah, I was just going to follow what Paul mentioned there. But if you look at the filing history of this company, right, since its inception in 2020, it's had 15 officers and 10 resignations. Yeah, and I wonder whether that is something that we need to look at in relation to risk around that company. I don't know if we've, as a committee, have looked into that in more detail to kind of assess some of the risks which are associated with the points that Paul made about getting people, whether there are issues about the restrictions on who can be on there, but the turnover there, in terms of the number of people that have resigned, has to be something that we've got to worry about, yeah, in a company that has that sort of turnover as well.
Mr. Wiles.
Yeah, just to clarify, the restriction element is mainly in respect of the statutory officers. So myself, Karen, and Graham Watts it wouldn't be appropriate or permissible for us to be working for the company and advising the council. So that's clear that there are some roles that are prohibitive. Beyond that, and probably linked to the comment made about David Scott replacing Paul Sutton, is because a skills audit was undertaken when Leisure SK got itself into some financial difficulties, that there was an apparent skills gap around the board, particularly around the financial elements, and hopefully the committee's been assured, since Paul was appointed to that board, working alongside Debbie and the other board members, that they've consolidated that element. And I think it's a good spot, if you like, that David is going in deliberately for that reason, to keep that stabilisation going forward. But I did want to assure the committee that that skills audit across the board has been undertaken and will be undertaken as part of any recommendations going forward in terms of replacing Debbie Roberts. Of course, the chairmanship of the board is for the board to decide, it's not for the committee, but we would like to see the person going into that board taking with them the competent skills that are required, either to take the chairmanship role or to at least complement other members around that table. The other thing to note is the relationship between the council and the company will change slightly more than subtly from the 1st of April as it turns into an agency model. So in effect it becomes a collecting body on behalf of the council. So that full autonomy and independence that it's enjoyed previously will be slightly changed as a result of the agency model. So they will be collecting on behalf of the council going forward. So the council will have more control and influence over the activities of that company. So some of the concerns that were raised previously about that apparent independence going outside the council's control will be mitigated by the change that will occur on the 1st of April. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I think you've answered a little bit there. I think what Councillor Shorrock and Councillor Stokes are voicing is the apparent lack of skill sets that may have been historically here, and that we keep that skill set and keep control over that skill set and probably have a closer eye on that skill set, if I'm reading you guys correctly. And it's how do we, what processes are we going to have in place if we do, as Mr. Watt suggested, delegate the appointment of Ms. Roberts' replacement? How do we monitor that? I think that's the problem. Councillor Whittington.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. This issue has been sort of rumbling on for as long as Leisure SK has been in existence. In the previous council term, because there were a whole number of different companies that SK were involved in, there actually was a companies committee. It's no longer needed because we only have one company left, which is Leisure SK. But this issue around the skill sets of the directors of not only Leisure SK but some of the other companies was a constant issue that was discussed then, and the whole nature of how these companies actually sit with SK so it has been an historic rumbling issue over the whole 5 years, and it's not I don't think it's a particularly easy question to answer. Perhaps we could get a little bit more on to understand the full extent of what the move towards the agency model will actually do, because all of a sudden Leisure SK, at the moment legally, a private company in effect, largely can do what it likes in terms of its directors, in terms of, you know, and you can see examples of a lot of private companies that have almost constant churn of directors as well. But of course, it's always been the nature of the relationship between the council companies and the council, which has always been, I think, has caused tensions. I'm just wondering, maybe we need something to actually understand what the changing status to agency actually means, because I think that's of importance as well.
Mr. Watts, is there any chance? Sorry, Councillor Shorrock. Mr. Watts, is there any chance that we can probably get a better understanding of what that switch over to the agency model will be? What it will actually mean?
I don't want to drop him in it, but I think Mr. Wiles should be able to give you a...
Sorry, I said Mr. Watts. I meant Mr. Wiles, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I'll just refresh myself, because the business case for the change came to Cabinet on, I think it was 10th of September. So, I mean, I'm happy for Councillor Whittington himself to sit down and talk that through. I think it's the kind of decision to go to the agency model has been made some months ago, and the business case for doing so was set out in that report that has been approved by Cabinet. So I suppose the role of this committee is the director appointment, but I accept the point that if the relationship changes, then that needs to be complemented by the director change. But principally what's happening is that the leisure activities are within the control of the council going forward, and Leisure SK will operate as a management company on behalf of the council. So the income being received by the leisure users will passport through from the leisure centres themselves through to the council, and the council will in turn passport money back to the company to pay the bills. So the control is with the council in the future, and the leisure company will operate within the tramlines of what the council wants it to do. So it will still be a company limited by guarantee, but it won't have the same freedoms that it had previously about here's some income and here's some things we might want to do with it. That income goes back to the council all the time in respect of leisure activities. Those outside of that parameter are still with the company, but they're modest, I think less than 10% of their overall activity. So they won't have the same freedoms of the cash that it had under the previous arrangement. And that in itself helps both the company and the council keep a tighter control over the activities of that company. So I think some of the issues that have been historical will be mitigated by this change.
Thank you for that. Councillor Shorrock.
Yeah, thank you for that. That was useful. It does beg the question, however, in terms of assessing whether there needs to be an agency there in the first place, about whether it should just be directly managed by the council or fully in-house. And I don't know if there's been an exercise to look at the pros and cons, right, of doing that if we're now shifting it into what is essentially a model to essentially pass money from one place to the other, when it comes down to it.
Mr. Wells.
This is purely a taxation strategy because it helps both entities in respect to that arrangement, because you haven't got the pension liabilities by two-bin the staff in, etc., etc. So financially, this is the best position for the taxpayer and the council.
Thank you for that. I think we're in danger of straying a little bit off piece here with this. Maybe that's something we need to bring to here. I'm happy to take that forward, but we're here to discuss today the appointment of a director and possibly the resignation of the director, and whether we delegate that appointment to cover the resignation or not. Councillor Stokes.
Yeah, you're quite right. We did go through that process, so it was gone through, and actually fair play to Richard, his recollection was spot on pretty well. I still think if we're going to have two people or one person named as a director of the company, whatever that, they're still going to be named as a director and carries significant responsibility. So even under the revised thing, I am still concerned about how somebody suddenly has the skill set to do that. That just sits with me as a concern, because it's still a significant responsibility on that position.
Sorry, so what are you suggesting, Councillor Stokes, that maybe the delegation's made to make a selection that's then brought back to this committee? Is that what you're suggesting?
I think I understand the need to move it quicker, but I wonder if somebody else, maybe even either the leader or the portfolio holder for leisure and culture, gets involved in that as well, to understand the skill set of that person. So I'm not doubting yourself or the head of paid service. I'm just thinking it's just so difficult. I feel for that person if suddenly, can you do it? I don't know. That's my fear.
Thank you. I'm all for the leader being involved in decisions. Full stop. So to go back a bit, not into all the ancient history, but when these companies, and there were a few, and we did have a companies committee. It started off with Gravitas, a house building company, and then we had Invest SK, and then we had Environment SK, and then we had Leisure SK, and we were going to have Housing SK and Deliver SK, but those two didn't get off the ground. They were presented at the time under a previous administration, pretty much with the, not literally, but kind of this time next year, Rodney, we're going to be Norfolk Property Services. Norfolk Property Services has been going for nearly 30 years and was a kind of an arm's length company from Norfolk County Council, and they are millionaires. They've got, they call themselves Norse, and they are all over the place. So that was the model to which the administration had aspired. Sadly, it didn't work out that way, and Gravitas, a house building company, managed to lose significant amounts of money by building 21 houses in the middle of Bourne. At least we built some houses, and there's more houses in Bourne. Environment SK lost something between 100 and 400,000 pounds of public money, depending on how you do the numbers. Invest SK, catastrophic in my opinion, in terms of the money that was spent and the way that it wasn't managed. So that leaves us with Leisure SK. We have had many meetings, especially at Culture Overview Committee, about whether or not this is the correct vehicle for doing it. There is a tension. It's almost a philosophical or political debate about the pros and cons of running things in-house or putting them out to the free market. There are many ways of doing it. There are some they call them tech companies or arm's length ALMOs, arm's length management organisations, where there's an argument for not having the council involved at all. There are some that don't have councillors or council officers involved on the board at all. But if you want the right people on the board from outside the council, you've got to pay for it. So we've got one Ned, non-executive director, who is paid for his services, and he brings a skill set to the board. If Leisure SK were to convince us that they'd found the right people and that they could employ people from the private sector who were willing to come and do that, then that's definitely an argument we'd listen to. But so far, those people are not being presented. As you've said, there's for various different reasons, people have come onto the board and moved off of the board. So one of the things that we do want on the board is some stability. I think that David Scott will bring some stability because at least he knows how the council works and how local government works and how these things are supposed to work. So I think for me it's a good appointment. But as we move forward, yes, we do need to think carefully about who we put on the board, and it shouldn't be. So when the company was first set up, the 4 members of the board were 4. I think they were all on. There were 4 Conservatives. They were all on the cabinet, and it was, well, hey, let's have a go at running a company. That wasn't an effective strategy at the time, and so we've learned that lesson. We're learning lessons all the time, but yeah, this isn't the place for deciding whether or not it's a direct management organisation or whether we should use the Wandsworth model and put everything out to the free market. I don't think that the free market's got all the answers, but yeah, so this is where we are at the moment.
Thank you, Ashley. Right, I'm going to move. Let's start trying to close this down now. So I think everybody's in agreement. If we can just hold on that one for a moment about the appointment of David Scott. So if I can get a proposal on that, seconder, and then we can take a vote on the proposal of David Scott. Thank you. And then the second item really in question is, who do you want to be delegated with selecting a replacement for the resignator? So Mr. Watt suggested myself and the head of paid services. I personally would rather go with what Councillor Stokes said and have the portfolio holder and the leader and the head of paid services. I think they're more suitable to if we were of a mind to delegate them to select somebody. I think that's more suitable. But I'm open to what the committee wants. Councillor Whittington.
Yeah, I think this is always difficult. And as I say, Councillor Baxter's went through the history of it. Of course, one of the companies was brought back in-house. When I was the portfolio holder for Environment, I brought Environment SK back in-house because there was no way it could work as a private company. It just couldn't, fundamentally. And actually, I don't actually think the local authorities, personally, I don't think local authorities should be getting involved in running private companies because I don't think we've got the skill sets. And I think that's probably why we've had such a huge turnover of people doing it, because it is very, very difficult to find the right people. It doesn't particularly matter to me a great deal as to what model we have for selecting the replacement for Debbie Roberts at all. But all I would say is that I suspect we'll be here in a couple of years' time looking for somebody else. I think it's going to be just a recurring issue.
Unfortunately, Councillor, I think that's the nature of the beast, with it being the organisation we are. People move on from jobs, etc., etc. People get married, So I think the turnover isn't the nature of the beast that we're at, unfortunately. But it's, we're trying to get better control over this and trying to have a better skill set within that board. And all I'm asking now really is, how do you propose to go about? Are you happy to delegate, as I'm happy to propose, the portfolio holder, the leader and the chairman of the head of paid services to go and select somebody. Is anybody happy to second that? And we'll delegate them to do that. Councillor Stevens, so can we take a vote on that, please? All those in favour? That's unanimous, thank you. Okay, so we can move on from that one. Thank you very much for that. And we now go to item, it's on your agenda as item 6, it will now be item 8, the accounting policies. Going over to Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Committee. It's a requirement to disclose the accounting policies that will be applied to the production of the statement of accounts, and good practice states that this should be considered and adopted prior to the commencement of the close down. The draft policy...
Sorry, just one moment. Mr Watts, could somebody call in Councillor Knowles and anybody else? Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Baxter, my fault. Okay, we'll carry on with that. Sorry, Councillor Baxter, for the interruption.
Okay, do you mind if I start again? It's a requirement to disclose the accounting policies that will be applied to the production of a statement of accounts, and good practice states that these should be considered and adopted prior to the commencement of the close down. The draft policies are provided for the committee to review, and these have been checked to ensure they comply with the code of practice. There is one minor change to the treatment of leases, but this is not considered to be a significant change to the production of the accounts. The report also includes details of the publication dates for the draft and final audited 2004-2005 statement of accounts, with a draft publication date of the 30th of June and an audited date of 27th of February. So I ask you to approve the statement of accounting policies, Appendix A, and note the publication dates. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Baxter. Councillor Whittington.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. I've had a read through the account policies. They're all fairly standard. Obviously, there is a change because around leases now, which is because the financial standards have changed. My experience tells me that there's been issues recently over the last few years when accounting policies for production of external accounts have changed, and we've been assured, and this is not any way a slight on Councillor Baxter, because it's been a requirement. It's the view the external auditors take, because we do know, for instance, around the valuation of fixed assets. That was badged a few years ago as being a minor change. It actually caused chaos with external audit, taking different views about how they value various things. And yes, I wouldn't be at all surprised if this doesn't produce from the external auditors potentially a lot more work. So I note the dates, but I actually think recent history has taught us that when even things that are badged as a small change actually depends on the view the external auditors take, and this isn't an attack on either Councillor Baxter or the officers here. It is just a matter of fact that that's what's happened recently, not just in this authority but across local authority external audits in general. So these dates, it's not so much the production of the draft accounts, because that's largely within our own control internally, but it's that final audited date, which I suspect is a movable feast.
Thank you, Councillor Whittington. Does anybody else have any comments to make? Can we take a proposal to approve these? Councillor Stokes and seconded by Councillor Whittington. Thank you. I will vote on that, please. Thank you. And if you all take due note of the publication dates. Thank you. So we're moving on now to what will be item 9, but was item 7. And again, back to Councillor Baxter.
Thank you. I was going to say at the end of the last debate that I'm quite capable of causing chaos. It's not my intention with either of these reports. Yeah. If I want to cause chaos, you'll know about it. If I do it by accident, I apologise. So, this report, the Treasury Management Report, Quarter 3, 2024-25, provides details of the Treasury Management activities in the period up to December 2024. The Council is required to comply with the Prudential Code, including the setting of prudential indicators for capital finance. The prudential indicators were approved by Council for the current financial year on the 29th of February 2024, over a year ago. No additional borrowing was required during the third quarter of 2024-25. All outstanding loans are shown at Appendix A. On investments, a breakdown of the investments are shown at Appendix A also, and are split between short-term investments and long-term investments. Overall, investment income is exceeding budget due to higher rates than anticipated. Investment income is split between the General Fund and the HRA in accordance with the level of balances. As ever, and I apologise for not doing this previously, I thank the officers who have put these reports together, including the aforementioned David Scott, but also Mr Wiles and all his team. I think the reports are well put together, and I recommend them to you.
Are there any questions, Councillor Whittington?
Yeah, again, I've been through this. It's good. It's a good report because there's no flashing red lights here at all. We are lucky, and we have benefited by the fact that interest rates are higher than we thought they were going to be. I suspect, given the current state of the United States economy, that's been the potential that's going to be spread across. I think interest rates potentially stay higher for longer than has been forecast. Just to give some reassurance on the borrowings, we have got 13 million quid out with other local authorities. That is actually probably one of the safest investments we can actually have, because as we know, even local authorities that I don't think for one moment we've got any loans to any local authorities that are in financial difficulties. But even if we did, such loans would be backstop guaranteed by the Treasury anyway. So it's a good report.
Thank you for that. Any more questions? Again, this is just to note the position on this one. We'll move on to item 10. I'm going to go first to Councillor Knowles, and then I think we'll go over to Mr Humphreys.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is to do with the Strategic Risk Register and including the Emerging Risk Radar. So there are two elements. It's to approve the outcome of the Emerging Risk Assessment and recommend any subsequent updates should they be necessary, and also to approve an Emerging Risk Radar, as we recognise there are risks that are occurring that perhaps were not significant before, but will become increasingly significant. Obviously, one of the examples is a consideration about the local government reorganisation. At this point, may I thank Tracy for the excellent report. I believe it's an excellent piece of work that she has produced for us, and very comprehensive, very informative, and very diligently prepared. And I would like to think that could be minuted, please, Chair. The Strategic Risk Register was last reviewed by the committee in September 2024. The assessment of the emerging risks has been has been undertaken in order to compare outcomes with the existing risk register and determine where updates may be required, and to create an emerging risk radar with things that are new to the risk profile. There are new risks identified as well as commentary on the existing strategic risk register, and there are 2 appendices starting on page 91, and I would welcome your support for Tracy and for the risk register. Thank you.
Thank you. We can go over to Matt now. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Harrison. As you've identified, Councillor Knowles, it was quite a significant piece of work that's been undertaken recently in connection with the Strategic Risk Register. There was 2 main elements to it as far as I can see. One was like a little bit of a retrospective look, looking at the existing actions in the Strategic Risk Register and looking at progress that was being made against those, which is very important because that's the way we continually either prevent harm coming to the council or we exploit opportunity that may present itself. So we've got an update in that in the form of the Strategic Risk Register at Appendix B. But the most interesting piece, potentially, is the forward-look element, as you've identified, which is looking at the emerging risk profile of the council. We did that using an RSM-based emerging risk profile that we work up with a whole range of organisations that we are involved with. So it's not just the RSM knowledge, but also sort of cumulative knowledge experience of all the clients that we work with and who we speak with to draw together those emerging risks. And we've used that as a comparison mechanism with the Strategic Risk Register to identify where changes are required, as you've quite rightly identified. What's been particularly interesting is some new strategic risks have emerged, and a whole new range of actions are starting to be considered that will continue to progress over the next few months. The other element that I'll just draw to your attention, during the conversations that we are having with management as a part of these discussions, is in the next series of activity, we're also going to be looking at the Strategic Risk Register, updating it for all of those items that have come out of the emerging risk exercise, and also considering further the appetite the council may have for some of these risks, because that informs further the way in which the council might want to engage with that type of risk. Again, going back to, do we need more? Do we need to do more to prevent us from harm? Or is there certain situations where we could be doing more to exploit opportunity? So that's going to be the next phase of work. So this was quite a significant piece. The Appendix A, which you've got, of course, identifies a commentary, as you quite rightly said, and then a couple of separate items in colour coding, which is sorry, I didn't write the report. The blue being additional actions, and the mauve font being a new strategic risk entry. So I don't think I need to say anything more, apart from, of course, it's incumbent on this Audit and Risk Committee, or sorry, Governance and Audit Committee's role to consider the ongoing effectiveness of risk management. This report helps you do that. And as I always say to all of my clients, risk always continues to move. It never stops.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Whittington.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. First, it's a general comment. After reading it through, it's a very good document. Based on previous experience, this is a very good document. I haven't seen many better than this in terms of certainly in terms of Appendix B, when it looks at the current risks and sort of goes through. It's an explanation of how the risk has been calculated, and for instance, and that's really good. I think it's very easy for members to follow. My question is, obviously, we have got some new, pretty fundamental strategic risks around local government reorganisation coming up, and I take the point that at some point they will be incorporated within the area that's currently under Appendix B. I'm just wondering when that will be, because we're at the start of this process, and I suspect that this is going to move at pace, and the risks could shift, and our I don't say shift, but our relationship with them is potentially going to change at pace. I'm just thinking that those, because they are so fundamental, I'm just wondering whether we ought to be considering reviewing some of those on a slightly more frequent basis. I know the last time we went through this register was 6 months ago. I'm just wondering, because of the nature of local government reorganisation, as those risks emerge. Would the committee feel happier if we had quarterly updates on that? Because I'm just thinking, because this is going to change the pace. I don't think any of us really quite know what the final models are going to look like, and there's a lot of challenge and risk to the council. I'm just wondering if the appetite would be that we get more frequent updates on these really important emerging strategic risks, which actually fundamentally do go to the entire heart of what SK does. Thank you.
Good point there, raised there, Councillor Whittington. I'm going to go first to Mr Wiles and then to Councillor Nell.
So I think our current take on that particular issue is today we've identified it as a risk that should go on the strategic risk register. So if that's approved today, then the next time you see the risk register will be in September, and that'll be on there along with all the controls and the actions and the mitigations that are in place around that. As a kind of key activity for the council, bearing in mind the submission doesn't go until 21st of March, and we don't know until 28th of November exactly what will be acceptable. We are expecting the government to feedback around June time as to what they think the indicative submission looks like from their perspective. So at that point, we'll probably get it into more of a project methodology. The council adopts a Prince 2 approach. That in itself has risks as part of that suite of documents that we would use to manage a project of that type. So the project management and the risk associated with it would fall into that definition at that particular point. This committee has got, as part of its terms of reference, is that strategic risk element, not project by project review. Otherwise, to be fair, you're going to get absolutely swamped in risk management, which isn't really the role of that committee. So there will be, if you like, two layers of risk management on that particular LGR project. One will be the strategic element, which we'll bring back here. One will be the day-to-day operational risk contained, because it will be multi-layered around finance, HR, contractual, the list goes on, doesn't it? That will fall into the methodology around projects, and that wouldn't necessarily come to this committee. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Whittington.
Yeah, but I think this is not an operational risk. I think this is a strategic risk. And I actually think what Mr Wiles is referring to is potentially operational risk. But there is a distinct difference between operational risk and strategic risk. So I actually think this is so fundamental. But this goes to the whole
I'll just come back to Mr Wiles on that then.
And it's not an operational risk. It's a
fair use the word operational. I said it's a project, and it would fall into the project methodology, such as the depot project, £9 million project, such as St Martin's Park, that falls into the same project discipline. LGR will fall into the same discipline. I'm not for one moment suggesting that the council will not be kept informed and will be informed of the progress around LGR. What I'm saying is it's not within terms of this reference of this committee to manage projects on a quarterly basis in that way.
Councillor Whittington, just 1 second, I'll come back to you, sorry. If I can go first to Councillor Knowles.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just an omission, when I was thanking Tracy for the work she'd done for this, I omitted to thank Mr Humphrey and his RSM organisation who assisted with that process, and I do apologise to you for that.
Councillor Shorrock, and then I'll come back to you, Councillor Whittington.
Yeah, thank you. Just a couple of things in the worth watching boxes, which also come up a bit later, around the kind of risk assessment as well. In particular around transforming the council through digital technologies, AI. I note that one of the things which is going to happen is that there's going to be some sort of SWOT analysis around that. That's obviously going, not sure where that exercise is being carried out, but that's obviously going to shape and feed into kind of the risk management part of that as well. So I'd be interested in how that's going to work as well. And it kind of ties in with what Councillor Whittington was saying, that to some extent on some things, not all, but some things we may need to be getting information sooner and more regularly about those particular things. So that's one question, which is around that. Second question, which I've never quite understood this, but under 7.2 worth watching, which is about the apprenticeship scheme. Right, we're unable to maintain and build sufficient staffing capacity and capability. I really don't understand that, because obviously there is a need for apprenticeships. We should be doing apprenticeships as an organisation. I don't understand why we don't have that capacity and capability to be able to do that. Other organisations do as well. So those two questions really.
Thank you. Mr. Wiles, do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, I mean, the transformation is an interesting point, because we've had the same conversation. Had LGR not come the way it has, there was going to be a lot of surge of activity around transformation, particularly embracing AI and other technology to automate a lot of processes the council undertakes. But now there's a massive question mark about whether investment in that is appropriate or even necessary, given there's a far bigger review of the authority potentially about to take place. So I think we're probably at a crossroads around that. Does the council stick or twist on continuing to invest and re-engineer its services, or does it now have a holding pattern pending the bigger review? And I think, to be fair, that conversation is going to stray into a lot of activities this council undertakes through its forward plan and its corporate plan, as to whether we just kind of keep the seat warm, or do we keep pushing this authority forward? And I think that's going to be an interesting conversation that we need to have. And in terms of apprentices, yeah, I kind of share that point, but if that's okay, I'll probably take that offline and talk to the head of HR and the head of paid service about that, because I know apprenticeships is a key priority for the council, and investing in apprenticeships is a key activity. So hopefully I can give some different information around that to reassure the members that that is being taken seriously. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. I'll let you to liaise with Councillor Shorrock on that. Just come back to Councillor Whittington and then Councillor Woolley.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. I think what Mr. Wiles has just said has actually highlighted the point I was making, that there is an awful lot going on. Do we go into a holding pattern? Do we continue pushing forward? And this fundamentally, it is about the nature of what this authority is going to be doing over the next 2 or 3 years. It does go to the whole heart of it, which is why I think we need more regular updates. I may not be able. I was wondering if it's possible they can go on the record of this meeting that I'm named, that I raised this issue and this concern, and I think we should be having quarterly updates on this, if possible, because I suspect this is going to come back and cause issues for us in the future. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
That's duly done, Councillor. If I can just, Councillor Woolley, go back to Mr. Wiles.
Just to reassure members, I don't think anyone is suggesting that we diminish the importance and relevance of the LGR. All I'm saying is, within the current constitution, I'm not sure this committee is the best committee in which to monitor that. I'd probably suggest, when Graham's in the room, that perhaps constitutionally we need to reflect on whether there's a different body, committee or governance structure that needs to be put in place should the LGR go forward in the way that we think it will, in which it can be properly governed and managed, and I think that's probably a conversation we can have separately. I do absolutely agree that it needs to be managed at the most important level, and the frequency of the information is shared at the appropriate time. I'm questioning the fit within this committee. That's the point I'm raising today. So I absolutely take the point, but I think constitutionally we might need to bend and flex that to meet the challenge ahead. Thank you.
Thank you for that. So if we can give that to Mr. Watts to have a look at for us. Councillor Woolley.
Thank you, Chairman. A small point, but on page 102, risk number 3, we talk about the serious health, safety and well-being failure, but any reference then to well-being it doesn't occur anywhere else, and I just wonder if we should discipline ourselves to, as a council, to refer to health and safety and wellbeing policy, health and safety and wellbeing manager. As I say, only a small point, but if we don't, I'm just wondering how we either direct councillors or indeed employees as to where this risk sits.
Thank you. I don't know if I'm going to go to that. Is that for you, Tracy?
I'm going to defer to that.
Oh, yeah, thanks, Tracy. Thanks, Councillor Woolley. I felt that come down the road.
Yeah. That's delegation.
I'm just going to say, yeah, point noted. I think if it needs bringing out more thoroughly in that risk, the point about well-being, then when we revise or review the strategic risk register with management, we can make sure that point's drawn out more so. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you for that.
So, just one is that obviously within the constraints of that register, we can only really identify some real key elements of it. But clearly, if there are more, the more significant ones perhaps need to be developed further to make sure the committee get full understanding of what we mean. I think we know what we mean, but sometimes when we write it, it's not coming through in the way you read it. Thank you.
Okay, I think we had a good discussion on that. Good few points raised. I'm going to ask for a proposer for the outcomes of the emerging risk assessment and recommended updates to the strategic register. Proposer to approve that. Sorry, Councillor, did you make an actual proposal? So you're making that as a proposal? Okay, so I've got a proposer for a quarterly, seconded by Councillor Shorrock. If we can take a vote on that, please. 5 on that. I'm abstaining. Abstentions. Okay, so we'll move on then to the outcomes to approve the outcomes of the emerging risk assessment. Can I get a proposer for that, please? Councillor Shorrock, a seconder. Councillor Whittington, and all those in favour? Unanimous, thank you. And then also a proposer to approve the emerging risk radar. Councillor Shorrock again. Councillor Stevens, second. And all those in favour? That's unanimous as well, thank you. So we move on now to item 11, the work programme. Do you have any input on that? Everybody happy with the work programme? Mr. Walls.
I mean, just say clearly it needs a bit of work, otherwise we've only got 2 items for the whole of next year, but so be it. I think just to help populate this, as you know, we'll come to the AGM in May with the annual report from yourself on behalf of the committee, and appended to that will be the indicative work programme for next year anyway, because a lot of your business activity goes as part of a business cycle, so we'll use that to populate this more fully. One of the benefits of this committee is you normally get full visibility of the whole year anyway, so you don't get many reports that come by surprise. Most of them are programmed and scheduled in advance, so hopefully next time you see this it'll be fully developed, because we'll follow through on the cycle that we would undertake. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Moving on to any other business from me? No, I'm afraid there isn't. So with that, at the time being 11:54, I'll declare this meeting closed. Thank you.